profile for Edge of Chrome now.
Fantastic. Okay, so welcome everyone to the October. So we're getting close to the end of the year. We've got Friday the 13th coming up. We've also got Halloween. If I can pull myself together for it, I might have some special Halloween photos for next month. My streak gets into Halloween theme and I've kind of been, but there's something that's motivating me to do it this year. Right, there's something new that I can decorate in the front yard that I think is very welcoming of Halloween decorations. See? You know why there's a childlike excitement building up with me. Okay, so welcome everyone.
It's not a child in the cage, it's all good.
There will be no living children in the cage.
Okay, good.
No living human children in the cage. Maybe I should stop the recording.
Fine.
It's October. It's okay. It's Halloween. Okay, so welcome everyone. So I'll just kick things off quickly here. My name's Mark O'Shea, and I'll just let the others who are listed on the slide introduce themselves. I think we're actually.
I'm Steve.
Hi, Steve.
And Ben, I think, has dropped and is coming back because he broke his audio.
Okay. So Ben will be back, and
hopefully, because he's the one talking tonight.
And Jaren should be reappearing or should appear briefly at some point.
Oh, Ben's back. He's going to introduce himself now.
Introduction. Hi, my name is Ben. I work with computers. Yeah, no, okay, I can hear you guys perfect now. I'm blaming new teams.
Yes.
Is that fair? No, sorry. Let's put our professional faces on. My name is Ben. I'm one of the software engineers at Patch My PC. Prior to this, I used to work with Steve. I don't know how that happened. I focus on Intune, graph automation, all the fun things. Cool.
Okay, so just a quick couple of things before we jump into tonight's topic, which is app deployment. So really just here, I think we do have a new member or a new attendee.
In person.
Awesome.
Would you like to introduce yourself and say hi?
Sure. I'm science. Yes, I'm happy with it. Used to it. It's my life. Hi, I'm Ryan. I work as I do multiple different bits and pieces, but at the moment I'm an IT support specialist, working for a MSP based out of Melbourne. But I also am in the process of starting a smart home business and a few other bits and pieces.
So, and anyone from chat who is attending for the first time?
Just put you on the spot. Feel free to hide if you want.
Just say hi or wave.
For anybody that hasn't been here for a while that would like to introduce themselves.
Quack is typing. I think he's going to introduce himself.
I hope so. Welcome.
So I'll get that out of the way. Okay, so just a couple of things on the event front. First of all, there is another Workplace Ninja happening, this time in Brisbane. So I don't know if anyone's in Brisbane. At least time-wise, is this something you'll be able to get to?
I won't be there.
Okay.
But Jose will be running it, coordinating the whole thing alongside a couple of the CAT team.
Okay, that's what I was going to say, because they're up in Brisbane.
Yep. So Ian and Chris should be there, likely Scott as well, from the CAT team. So there's going to be some really cool topics. One of the big ones that I think is going to be pretty cool is delivery optimization sessions. So how to set up delivery optimization to be successful in your deployments. And obviously there's going to be the panel and all of that. So if you're in Brisbane or want to go to Brisbane, make sure you get up and go and have a look.
Is that going to coincide with some type of announcement of something maybe finally hitting GA?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
I think the only time that's ever going to go GA is when they put the acronym back to DOINK.
Yeah.
And what you have to remember, Mark, there is not going to be any announcements until the third week of November.
What's happening in the third week of November, Steve?
I don't know. You missed an event though, Mark. You missed MMS Miami.
Oh, when's that?
It's the week after.
Let me just enter.
Yeah. So MMS Miami is the secondary event for the MMS event series, and it's the first week of November in Miami Beach, which is going to be a lot of fun. And then obviously, there's Microsoft Ignite.
And if you were planning on attending in person and you don't have a ticket yet,
Find someone with an RSVP token and you might get a ticket.
Yeah, that's basically already getting pretty close to capacity. But there will be sessions online.
Not my one.
Yeah, but they're going to be in this. Yeah, so basically PST. So probably going to be easier in most cases to watch recordings at your convenience as opposed to getting up at 1 a.m.
At least daylight savings is ticked over.
Oh, so it will be
It's actually
a couple of
not
hours
too
of
bad.
overlap.
Yeah. Like from a timing point of view, it's actually not too bad right now.
That's relative. Someone likes
Yeah.
getting up early in the morning.
I do.
Okay, so that brings us into the main topic for today, which is, I think there was like some specific questions about targeting, group targeting with apps, and then just anything else you sort of think of that sort of grows out of that conversation. Just drop it into chat so that either we can drop a comment in, or alternatively, if it's something that Ben wants to jump into as part of his discussion. But otherwise, Ben, over to you.
All right, cool. Let me share my screen. Oh, hey, it's the Rockstar.
Yeah, it is.
Nice. I haven't seen this guy in a long time.
He heard you were presenting, so he had to turn up.
Nice. Very good. Very good. All right. I'm not presenting. I'm just going to put this out here. I'm going to talk about some stuff and then we're going to discuss it. So
I expect you're going to show me an Intune portal.
are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Here's my Intune portal. Can everyone see how many apps I've got in here?
I think you need more.
Trust me, that can be accomplished. Let me keep going. I think I have 10,000 apps in here. I was testing something and I haven't cleaned up. Let's at least get to 1,000.
Did you turn on recursive?
No, I turned on a do until. I needed to confirm. Let's say the load balance of a thing. Let's get to 1,000. There we go. 999. And then it just starts fake app 1. So anyway, I was having a bit of fun. So let me just scroll back up to the top. So I guess the conversation we're going to have today, it's going to be very loose. It's going to be as if an insane jet lagged man is talking to you. Someone last month, I can't remember who, raise your hand if it was you. It wasn't you, Steve, asked when we asked about session topics, they brought up a fairly common refrain, which is, how do I know when I should assign an application to a user or to a device? Now, this can be a very, very quick conversation where I say, it depends, drop my mic and walk away. But there can be a little bit more, there can be a little bit more nuance to it. I'm going to say a couple of things and then I want Steve to correct me on it. And then like from there, once we get past this conversation, if anyone's got any more questions around applications, deployments and things like that, I'm just going to open up to the floor and I'll try and answer it as best I can. But at the end of the day, we are the community that knows how this is done. So I don't guarantee that I know all things. I'm sure collectively we all know enough to keep ourselves employed, which is the important thing here, right?
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. So as I said, the main question was how do I deploy an application, and what context should I use? I wasn't joking that it literally means it depends. The most important question you need to ask yourself is, first of all, how is the software deployed to your machine? So if it's system, then you can do both user or system. And if you deploy that application to the user object and it needs to run in system, it'll work just fine. If it is a user scoped installation, which specifically means that it installs to the user context, then you absolutely need to deploy it to the user. Otherwise, you don't get access to any of the fun user profile nonsense that we all know and love, thanks to the way that Chrome installed and everyone deciding to jump on that and make it the standard, which is also a really fun way to do a nice proof of concept that you can essentially deploy viruses. We won't talk about that. Only because certain fun apps like Teams also use the same thing. Not the new one. The new installation doesn't use
Squirrel.
yes. So that's fine. Okay, so we're going to use this example of 7-zip, and I'm going to tell you the pros and cons, because like all things in tech, there are always pros and cons depending on how you deploy it. Because Intune is an imperfect management solution that gets our job done 99% of the time. So there are caveats with everything that we need to deal with. So we're going to use 7-zip as an example because it's currently not assigned to anything. We're just going to open this up. And so again, 7-zip is just and it's been deployed by Scatman. That's great. I deployed this a very long time ago. All right. So what we're essentially doing here is we want to deploy this as system, but when we want to deploy it to the user. Now, what happens when we deploy it to a user is that this will deploy to any device that user is currently logged onto. So the con here is that if you're in an environment with users who are roaming onto different machines, if you deploy a required application to that user, it's going to go onto all of those machines. That's a real pain. So this is one of the huge cons of deploying to user. Now, user deployment is the primary thing that you did in Intune, the early days of modern Intune, because Intune is, and hopefully we all know, a user scoped or a user focused management platform. Almost the device doesn't matter. The idea initially with Intune was that you would hit the user and then sort of fan out into all of the devices that they looked after, which works really well in that one scenario where you're in a modern workplace. You've got a couple of laptops or a couple, like a tablet, a laptop and a phone, but it doesn't really scale super well to environments where you have a bank of kiosk machines, or it's a call center, or you're in a factory with 100 machines and you all share a login, which why would you do that? We've all seen it. So the scenario here is that if you can deploy an application that installs a system and you only want that deployed to the user, and it doesn't matter what device they use because you're in an environment where that person is only ever going to use the one device that is assigned to them, or the handful of devices, then there's absolutely no problem simply going into here, saying required if it is a core business application. That's a very important one to flag. Let's just go. Let's find a group. Where are we?
Probably have a 7-zip one there.
Do I even have a 7-zip group? I don't think I do. You know what? I'm just going to make a group because then we can explain a couple of other things as well that maybe not everyone here knows. So we're going to go in groups. We're going to create a new group, and it's going to be called Steve, because he's there and I can see him waving. Group description, test group.
Only if my user object gets added in there.
I don't even think you have an account in my tenant, so
Should.
it's probably not the best. Always give correct namings for your security groups, guys. It's fairly important. Don't do what Donnie doesn't do. Okay, so we can do roles can be assigned to the group. That's fine. We're going to go membership assigned. Then we're going to go ahead and we're just going to add a couple of users. Let me go. This one looks
Don't
good.
get removed. Disappointed, Finn.
Yeah. What can I say? I periodically make sure there's no untrustworthy people in my environment.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. All right. So I've got 2 members there. The reason that I wanted to show everyone that is that it's very important with AAD security groups, specifically the way that Intune works, is to never mix and match users and devices. It can work, but it is strongly recommended to segregate your devices and user groups so that you get an even or a more reliable experience when you're deploying software. Because I've seen it before, it doesn't work. One of the more common scenarios that I've seen that people think will work is setting a required install for users and then setting a required uninstall for security groups, thinking that that will remove the software from those devices and only install it to the user. So if the user has a laptop and a desktop, they have a group with the desktop in it, and then they deploy it to the user. They think that that's kind of like doing a filter. Filters exist for this reason. They solve that problem. But the most important thing to flag there is if you are deploying things as required, which uninstall and required are the same thing, just with different end results, you cannot mix and match user and device groups. So this is where that conversation around, like, pick one and use that. And this can be on an app by app basis as well. So this isn't a make one decision for all of my deployments. This is a one thing at a time. Every time you deploy a thing, you can make decisions. So okay, I've created that group. Let's go back into our apps. All apps. Oh, what was that error? Nice. Microsoft Store for Business apps are no longer being enforced and will soon be deleted. That's very strange wording. Not being enforced.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Good language. All right. So let's go back into 7-zip.
Our language good.
Yeah, exactly. Me no English. Good and stuff. All right. So we're going to go into properties. We're just going to go down to assignments. And again, we're just going to make this required. I wonder whether Laura's actually got a device on here, and this will be quite funny. Steve.
Ben, why can't I just go and make it available to enroll devices, and then I just go and install it as I need it?
So that's a really good question, Steve. Thanks so much for asking. This is one of those scenarios where you need to make a decision in your environment, and only you can make this, or your business. What is considered business critical software? If that application, 7-zip as an example, is not deemed business critical, there is a recommendation from me personally that you should deploy it as available. Because if it is not mandatory to meet some kind of compliance or even just business goal in your environment, then is there any need for you to force that software onto the computer? Most of the time, if you sit down and you do reviews of environments and you say, how many applications have you got in your environment? Someone will very proudly say, we have 500 applications. We have 1,000 applications. I'm like, okay, does everyone have them? And they say, well, no. Certain departments need this, other departments need this. So that's where you can have a mix and match. Yeah, I mean, that's core business applications for different departments, which is absolutely a thing. That's totally fine. But that's where you start really focusing your security groups. And then the next question is that I always get when you talk about, well, if you've got different departments, you need to have different security groups. The next question is, well, how do I manage those groups? I'm like, excellent. You do it because it's your job. You look after security groups. You need to be able to know when people move around. This gets into an even bigger conversation of, well, what if they move departments without telling anyone? Cool. You need to drill down and figure out where the failures are of the process of someone being offboarded from one group to another.
It's called an IDAM.
Yeah, exactly. So, all of these problems have solutions, and most of them are making sure that your workplace policies and just user flow for moving from one group or signing up are documented so that you can say, hey, we're moving to a new platform, or we've been using this but it's not been working properly. We need to improve this flow. So again, it's business process, as well as just, unfortunately, sometimes it's our job to maintain security groups. So
Ben, just to tease this out a little bit more,
sure.
So if I go and deploy, say, 7-zip, or my favorite being CM Trace to my my account, and I just go and log on to an IT user's computer, can I just go and manually, as an available application, just go and use that?
So that's a good question. As a rule of thumb, And I want someone to confirm this to me because it has been a very long time since I spun up a VM to confirm this. But up until recently, if you had applications made as available for enrolled devices and you signed into someone's computer that was not assigned as you as the primary user, if you open up the company portal, there's a chance that you will not see that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So this is where that gets a little confusing. So this is again where it's targeted to the user. Now, up until recently, and someone needs to confirm me on this because I could be making this up because I haven't physically confirmed it. If you deploy an application as available to a device, up until recently, you did not see that in the company portal. I've heard rumors that that has changed.
And I haven't tested.
I haven't tested it either. So everyone that's on this call, it's your responsibility and not mine to spin up a lab environment or just a virtual machine, deploy an application that's available to the device, and then go into the company portal and see if that pops up. If it does, that's going to solve a lot of problems. But it is just worth noting that if you do deploy it to the device and it is a user-based installer, there's a chance that that's not going to play nice. So there are problems with that, and that one specific scenario, which is a very common one, the desk side support agent logs into their computer or logs into the user's computer that's got a problem. They open up the company portal to pull down CM trace. They're not going to have a fun time. There's a very important solution for this, and the people doing desk side support should not be logging into other people's computers. If they're doing any kind of troubleshooting, the users should be there. They should be logged into that machine. If they can't do that, they really need to reapproach how they are doing troubleshooting. But also potentially there needs to be some kind of remote desktop user account that they're using to access that machine if you physically need to log onto a computer.
Use Windows Labs as an example.
Precisely. So, I mean, one of the scenarios there is it goes back to that point where, so I'm creating this group, right? There's one user account in it. I've made this required. I'm going to deploy this out. So in the scenario that Steve just brought up where, desk side support is just logged onto someone's computer, if that user did not have 7-zip installed on the computer, well, they're going to, because this is required to install on any device that the user in this security group is logged onto, not based on primary access or primary user of the device, which I would potentially posit that might actually be a really good experience if you could say, please only deploy to the users in this group if they are the primary user, because then you could solve quite a lot of problems with this. I don't know how that looks architecturally, but I might start poking some people. So this is the most common.
Just use a filter, right?
That's an interesting one. So the next scenario with this is, okay, so I've deployed this to a user group, and these users have got a whole bunch of machines, but I want to make sure that they're only deployed to specific devices. This is the only time when you can mix and match users, because what we're doing here is the correct logic. So we're deploying to a user, and then we're filtering based on the device of that user. So this is the way that this should be done. And it's been a minute. Do filters support user groups yet?
I believe so. What do you mean by filter user groups?
Do they? Hang on, let me do a thing. Because when they first rolled out, they did not support filtering on users. They only supported filtering on devices.
I think it's still only devices.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I wanted to get at. It is a thing that is in the works in the background. I know that they're working on it, but at the moment it's just devices. That would be a scenario that solves the I'm deploying to devices, but please filter on this. So, that gets that around that scenario. But for the moment, the filtering process is get a large group of users, filter based on devices, and that gets you a targeted deployment. So I'm just going to go in here and say include. Let me guess. I don't have any filters.
You don't have any filters.
Nice. All right. Let me go back. I'm going to make a filter. Let's see how long we can pad this out for.
I'm sure I can help you fill it out.
Oh, I'm sure you can, buddy. Let's have a look here.
If you go, any of the top levels will have filters attached.
So we're going to create a. Oh, there's managed app filters. I actually don't know what these are. We can have a look at those in a second. But we're just going to call this example filter. Everyone can see this, okay? I'll just zoom it up a little bit. Description. Also, just for anyone that's playing around with graph automation, when creating these things, put in names that are like name, description, and platform, so that when you look in like the developer tools in Chrome or Edge, you can actually see the data and see actually where it lives. It makes your life much better. All right, so we're just going to focus today on Windows 10 and later. Can't wait for Windows 12. It was a joke, Stephen. All right, so we're going to create a basic rule. We're going to go in here. And we're going to say property type. So very limited scoping of what we can do here. And this is primarily because we're only exposing filters based on data from AD, or sorry, Entra, because filters are an AAD or an Entra object thing. They are not an Intune thing. I do have, I've spoken to people that are working on this with the potential that they're looking at expanding that out, but these things take time. So we work with what we've got. So we've got device names, manufacturers, models, device category, OS versions, etc. These are fairly broad stroke things. The most common, demo scenario that we talk about is I only want to deploy my this application to my virtual machines and not my physical machines. So that's what we'll focus on today. But we can also see enrollment profile name and join type, ownership, things like that. Actually, let's do ownership because that's kind of what we wanted to talk about.
Ownership's personal.
Yeah, so we can see personal, corporate, and unknown. Let's just have a quick look at some of them. This will just be fuzzy logic.
That's for text, yeah.
Yeah, let's do this. So we can see Azure AD joined, Azure AD registered, hybrid Azure AD joined, or unknown. There's some cool things that you can work on here. Device category is just whatever you put that in. Device name, manufacturer, and model. So model is the one that we generally use to capture virtual machine. I believe it's just like starts with virtual. We'll see if this works. We can hit preview. Yep, I've got a virtual machine in my environment. That's pretty cool. Good cleanup, Ben. I think that's about 3 years old. All right, let's go create. So we're going to go back in, go into all apps, 7-zip, properties, edit, add group. Select the group Steve that does not have Steve in it.
Very disappointed.
Yeah, it's fine. You'll be right. We're going to say include and example filter. We're going to select that. So what that's now going to do is it's going to say for any users in group Steve that have a device that is matching this filter, which is virtual machines, we want to require this to be deployed to that environment. We've got things like our end user notifications. So if we click on this, we've got options to say, do we want to show all toast notifications? This sort of thing. I come from the land of or the camp of don't show the user anything they don't need to see, because otherwise you're going to lower your compliance on installs. And then we've got our delivery optimization priority, which is kind of cool. But I would suggest that in the more modern environments that I'm used to, this is kind of unnecessary these days, because if everyone's sitting at home, there is no need to do any delivery optimization. So the DO stuff in here is really cool for sort of on-prem organizations, because once you sort of hit a certain threshold, then it starts caching out from your machine. So, if you can, there's definitely no harm in just turning this on. It's only going to. It's on by default.
So
there you go. So we don't even need to worry about it. You need to actively choose to not have that. But it does. The delivery optimization priority is how much bandwidth do you want to focus on sort of getting that content down. So by default, its content is downloaded in the background, which is good, especially if you're doing large on-prem deployments. Say, a brand new rollout and you've got 400 or 500 machines all trying to pull down the same app. If it's a large app, that can be a bad time. If it's small, or you've been in an environment that's working quite well, and you just need to deploy an app and it's not going to cause any major problems. If you want it out immediately, you set it to content download in foreground. That is essentially going to say to your device that when you get that request to pull content down, stop whatever you're doing, get this as a priority. So this will get things down faster with the aforementioned risk that you could flood your network a little bit. If it's a large app, again, everything comes with caveats.
And what you can do with delivery optimization profiles is you can set your available bandwidth for both foreground and background and number of threads, storage, and things like that. So you can tune it as you need. But realistically, unless you're explicitly having networking issues, you shouldn't need to touch DO.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed. And also, I've lost count of the amount of times that I've seen very aggressively tuned DO policies that cause problems, right? Because they've gone, well, we're actually only going to allow 20% of our bandwidth traffic to be allowed for this sort of thing. And then you sit down, you deploy out Office, and then everyone freaks out because Office is taking 4 hours to download. And
it takes a month to install updates because it can only trickle them down at 20%.
Exactly. So, these things are, there is an art to them, but there's also some logic to it as well. The more you sort of squeeze the pipe, so to speak, the slower things will be. So, for those who think they're doing the right thing by tightening it up, they probably want to test that in a larger environment than just their device when they're doing that sort of stuff.
Minimum 3 devices, but if you're going to do a proper test, 10 devices before you start seeing differences with delivery optimization.
Exactly. All right. So while we're on the screen, because this is actually a conversation that I had with some people over in at the App Manage event conference that I just attended, which, Steve, it was very warm there this year. So just remember the first time we went and we were freezing to death.
Yep.
I wished I brought shorts.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that hot. No, I didn't. I should have. Anyway, okay. So show of hands or just in the chat, who knows what app availability actually does and means? I'm going to give everyone just a little bit of time to raise their hand. Because I think this is a fairly misunderstood thing. I can see a bunch of people typing. And Adrian says, is it MSIX app attach? Is that in relation to what I'm talking about? Because it's no, that's not what this is. Okay, so app availability is.
Hang on, Rob's got to put his hands up there.
Okay, all right.
You want to go, Rob?
Maybe he's just saying.
Yeah, I do. I've played with it a little bit.
Okay, cool. Okay. So for everyone else, app availability, if we set this, so the way that's currently set as soon as possible and the deadline is as soon as possible, with these two values set to the same thing, which is ASAP, what this means is it's going to deploy out straight away. If I say go in and say specific date and time, I'm going to do, what is the date today? The 11th. I'm going to say it's going to be available on the 12th at midnight, and I'm going to do a deadline at a specific date and time. I'm going to say, actually, no, let's do this proper. I'm going to start getting ready for a deployment on next Monday, and then I want to make sure that the app is installed on the 20th. So I'm giving it a week. So what most people think is going to happen here is that based on app availability, that the end users are going to be able to install this application from Monday from the company portal, and that by Friday, the application is going to be forced on the machine. That is not correct. That is not true in any way, shape, or form. What app availability means is when can the computer start pre-caching the installation of this software? That is really, really important. If you set these out of band, this value means nothing. The end user will not get any notifications. They won't even get the software onto the computer until the deadline value. So if you are trying to delay a deployment If it is a large application that you know is going to cause some problems getting over to your, say, your remote sites or your satellite sites, absolutely set the availability date to give yourself some room to pull that content down. But otherwise, your most 90% of your cases, set the availability and the deadline as the exact same thing. So in this scenario, I would change this to the 20th. Apparently it's not going to let me do that, but
No, you need to set the app installation deadline to 12/01 or ASAP.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's fine. Anyway, we'll just do it like this. But essentially what this means is that, you want to make sure that these two values are like either exactly the same, which you can do through Graph. I guess the UI is trying to not let you do these things.
Yep.
But there is no point in having the availability earlier than the deadline unless you know that you need to pre-cache that content. Does that make sense for everyone?
So does everybody remember this in Config Manager? When if you used Config Manager, you could do the deployment types, and what the little hack was is if you specified a date and time that was preceding right now, it would actually install faster than setting it to ASAP because it ran down on a different channel to do the checks. But I don't think that works with Intune.
Yeah, no, it does not. And in fact, if I go back and set this to the 10th, it's going to let me do it. I don't think it's going to change anything. I just think it's going to start pre-caching that very quickly. So,
well, that's going to do your download, which is fine, but it's the install.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, can we do that? It's the 9th. I mean, it's not going to stop me from doing it. I don't think that's going to do what we think it's going to do. But let's just do it because I like breaking my environment. So we've got content download in foregrounds. We're going to hide all toast notifications. We're making sure the assignment setting is set to include, and then we're just hitting OK. So one of the other common scenarios that people will run into is they have a group of users, but they want to exclude specific people from that group. So that's absolutely a thing you can do. You need to be very careful with how you do this. But if you go into add group, same deal. Let's just Melbourne Office A has probably got someone in it. We'll select this. We can set our include value to exclude. This is filters. Sorry, let me get out of this for a second. Show notifications excluded. So what that's doing now is, say in both of these groups, I had Laura and Steve in the Steve group, and Melbourne Office A only had Steve. What that's going to do is it's going to deploy a required deployment with the person in this group removed from the overall collection. So this is an additive removal where if you are in that excluded group, you will be absolutely removed from this deployment. So this is how you can have big buckets of users and then you can filter that down. So one of the things that Steve and I used to talk about was the idea of a baseline group, which is potentially either all of the users in your environment or all of the users in each department, depending on sort of how large your workforce is. And then you would have smaller groups that you could use to sort of chop and change who actually got that deployment. So, that's a really important way to sort of work here. But again, as I said, these two need to be users. They cannot be users and devices.
Or they need to be both devices.
Correct. It needs to be either users or devices. You just, if no one believes me, just do it and see what happens.
Yeah, it's fun.
What could possibly go wrong? Okay. Yeah, exactly. All right. So that hopefully covers like the user approach. So this is a application that someone has told me that this is a core business application. We need to deploy it to all of our users in this specific group as soon as humanly possible. And then moving forward, we need to make sure that we're obviously updating that thing because all software needs to be updated, right? I work for a patch management platform. I probably need to keep saying that. But this is how we do that. The other scenario is we need to deploy specific applications to devices because we work in an environment where we know that the devices will always be in certain business units. it's very, I believe, an outdated approach, but it is a thing that, you know, we still sort of work in environments where we care about where the devices are. You know, they're chained to desks.
It's for the air-gapped environments, Ben.
This is for the air-gapped environments that you're managing with Intune. That's correct. So, you know, in that scenario, or you're still working in an environment where, unfortunately, as a desk side support or first or second level support, you still have to physically go to machines, and the business expects that, you know, out of hours, you're going in and logging into computers to do updates. Now, it's 2023. We should never be in a situation where that is still a thing. But, you know, I do live in the real world and I know that it exists. So in those scenarios, you really do just need to make sure that when you're deploying user-based things, be very mindful that your on-prem or, you know, your desk side support team are not part of these groups, because if they're getting lots of software assigned to them as required, it's going to be a bad time. It's going to be a very, very bad time. So in the scenario that you can't use users because people are jumping around on machines, then we need to start thinking about, well, okay, let's deploy to the device. I don't always necessarily believe that device should be a secondary thing. You should always be focusing more on the user than the device. This just comes from the mentality of how Intune works. But there are scenarios. At Patch My PC, we have a great example where applications we strongly recommend to deploy to user, but updates themselves, we don't care. Deploy and do anything. So in that scenario, what we generally recommend is to deploy updates from Patch My PC specifically to devices, because we have a requirement logic in the payload that will only actually install that software on the machine if it's necessary. So in that scenario, you can absolutely just shotgun this thing out to every single one of your environments. And aside from a lot of noise in the IME logs, you're going to actually reach every single device in your environment. So in that scenario, that's where we generally recommend devices, because it's not going to follow the user around to all the different computers they log into, but it is going to reach all of your devices. And I think that's the important sort of delineation here. If you need a thing to go everywhere, regardless of user or business unit or anything like that, then you can deploy it to device and that will go out. Especially if you've got good requirement logic, you can actually sort of, you know, control when and where that actually goes out. You know, again, very selfishly, the good example is how we do sort of updates at Patch My PC. But, you know, you can sort of build that out yourself as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove these. Does anyone have any questions for me while I'm clearing this up? Because I feel like I'm talking and everyone's eyes are glazing over, because app deployments is the most fun thing in the world. Silence.
No, it all makes sense. More the logic about who and what you can't deploy to, which is interesting.
Yeah,
But no,
sure,
we're
sure.
We're listening. Don't worry.
Yeah, awesome. There is another important delineation that, you know, obviously available for role devices and required. There is a scenario where people will try and do something like this. They'll go, "Oh, I want to, you know, I want to delay the deployment. So I want to deploy to Steve, to group Steve, and I want to make my availability and deadline." You know, they've now been told by Ben how availability works. So they're going to go ahead and they're going to set this to 23. And they're going to set this to 24. All right, cool. We've given ourselves a nice delay, so we're getting ready for this deployment. But for the interim, you know, we're fairly confident the application will install. So for the brave amongst us, let's make it available as well. So we go into Steve, go in here, we select. Note what's just happened here. It's automatically set that to excluded. You cannot deploy to a single application to the same security group with multiple intents. I only know this because I work way too much with the graph side of things, but what we're looking at in the titles here, these are called the install intents, which I guess kind of makes sense. So the install intent of required, available, and uninstall. You cannot mix and match these things. So I cannot deploy to the same group. And this is basically to save yourself shooting yourself in the foot. So if I go in here, see, I've just got no way to change this. If I go through and I remove this and go into exclude, hey, look at that. I've got the option here to set this. So this is to stop stop us from doing silly things like, let me remove this. Yes, I'm going to go in. I'm going to add that group. This is something that I've absolutely seen people attempt before, and they don't know why it doesn't work. We're going to go in required, and we're also going to go into uninstall, and we're going to select Steve. Lord knows why anyone would think that that was going to work, but you're now in a situation here where you've got required and uninstall. So, I mean, it's going to install, but the uninstall will never happen because it's excluded. So this is to stop yourself putting yourself in a situation where you push an app out and then it immediately follows up with an uninstall request that removes that software. Because you can do this stuff in Config Manager. So this UI decision was designed to stop you from shooting yourself in the foot. It's fairly important to flag. All right, so let's kill this. We're going to go yes, and we're going to review and save. So we've just spoken about assignments, and I have no assignments set. So what I'll do is I'll go in and create another device group, new group, security, Steve's PC. I'm going to go into members, devices. Let's just pick a random one. Sounds good. This is obviously Steve's computer. Also, it's probably worth mentioning if you are creating groups, set yourself as the owner of that group so that you can actually make changes later. This will come and bite you in the ass if your RBAC is configured either aggressively or aggressively correctly. If you're not the owner of certain security groups and you're not an overall either a subscription owner or admin of Intune, you can actually put yourself in a situation where you then need to get someone with higher permissions to actually make changes to those groups. So when you create a group, just always put yourself in the owner of that group, because otherwise you can run into problems. So I'm just going to go in and do that myself. I'm going to follow my own rules here. All right, happy days. Cool, so we've got a security group now called Steve's PC. We're going to go back into that application. We're going to go into all apps. Exactly the same experience as we had before. We're just going to go into properties. And we're just going to make this group mode set to Steve's PC. Cool, exactly the same experience, but what this is going to do now is it's only going to look for that device being online. It's going to pull that policy down to the machine, and it's going to install that software. So again, this is a really good scenario where you're deploying software that is absolutely flagged as core business, and you know that either a certain department or every single device in your environment has to have this software, regardless of who is logged in. And that's the other important thing. If you're deploying this and you expect it to be on every single machine, but maybe a user who is unmanaged is on one of the computers, then they're not going to get that. So deploying to the device will mean that we're pointing it at the machine. If it's not there, it will be there. Obviously, this depends on your detection logic on your custom applications. This sort of stuff can't fix that, but this is the approach that we go. We don't care about the user. This software has to be on the device. And approaching it this way will absolutely work. As I said, I have a feeling that if you add a device group, and this is also potentially truthful here, Steve, because this never used to be a thing for the available add all devices group. So I actually do think that this works, and I would be very curious for anyone who's got an environment and the time to test this out. Simply just go in and create a group that's got your device in it, and then just see if it comes up. Now, again, you get the same logic as user. I can't have the same group twice. This is, again, to stop yourself from doing silly things. But in an optimal scenario, it would actually be nice for this to work. If you make a required deployment, but also make it available so that, if you make it required for a week, but make it available immediately, that is what most people want to do in these situations. But just understand that the intents are also on a priority scope. So if I have a group called Steve's PC and it has Steve's PC in it, and I actually create another Steve's available PC and put just his device in, and I make it available, required will win over available, because it is a priority-based tiering thing. So don't think that you can game the system, because it's not about gaming the system. It's about doing it correctly. You either want to make this thing end up on a machine, or you want it to be available. Pick one. Don't pick both. They've made the UI in the way that, you know, they're not trying to stop you from doing cool things. They're trying to stop you from doing silly things. And that is functionally what this is. Okay, that's honestly probably about as much as I can talk about assignments. We've done users. We've talked about security groups. We've talked about making sure that you don't mix users and devices. We've talked about filters. Filters are still, in the scheme of things, pretty new, and I'm curious to know how many people are using them in their production environments. If you are, just leave a message in the comments, because filters honestly do solve quite a lot of problems. Dynamic group memberships still aren't great. Ever. They need to.
I'd say that even with filters, just like using them in your lab environments to, like, if you've got, let's say your lab environment is also your personal production environment, using filters to target your VMs versus physical devices, etc., comes in really handy.
It really does.
A good way to learn it quickly, because if you mess up, you figure it out really quickly.
Exactly.
You have your partner screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, look, architecturally, the way that filters were sort of developed is just great. You know, it has a cached copy of all the data in Intune, so that when you create the filters, you can really quickly hit preview and sort of see what the blast radius would be. But in reality, when it's actually deployed out, you know, that policy goes down to the machine, and the machine does the filtering on whether it should get it or not, which is well. It's done at deploy time.
Yes, it's
so
done at the gateway, not at the client side.
Sure. Okay. Well, then it's just everything I said, take it away. But it's significantly faster than dynamic assignments are, where, you know, we've all created dynamic assignments before. When you're in the UI and you're doing the creating the thing, you can hit preview and sort of see how it would work. But the actual implementation of how it's run is server side, and it only runs on a you know, what is it, every couple of hours or something it updates. It's not in your control.
Groups.
What's that?
You're talking about the dynamic
Yes,
groups
correct.
thing. So the SLA for dynamic groups, does everybody know what that is? Minimum of once every 24 hours. That is the SLA of dynamic groups to be updated. If you have a small number of groups, objects in Azure Active Directory, sorry, Entra ID, that could be increased to more frequent. But the more dynamic groups you have and the more objects you have in your Entra ID, the longer the delta is between your group updates going to occur.
Yeah, that's correct. So that is why, if you are making constant changes to dynamic groups, so let's just play the scenario that you can't use filters for whatever reason. I mean, there are scenarios. Not all functionality in Intune supports filters yet. They focused aggressively on apps, which I think is the correct decision. But, you know, again, if for whatever reason you can't use filters and you want to use dynamic groups, if you're making rapid changes to those because maybe, say, you're testing things and you're not getting it quite right, the fastest way to get a dynamic group to update is to delete the group and start again, because it processes immediately when you create a new dynamic group, whereas, as Steve said, it can take upwards of 24 hours to sort of refresh. So if you make a group and then you make a change, don't expect it to apply immediately. Always just assume that dynamic groups can be burnable. Just get rid of them and start again. Cool.
The problem is if you've assigned it multiple places, then you can't just burn it.
So yeah, the scenario that Steve's essentially saying is, once your dynamic group becomes production,
targeted in more than one location.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to be really careful with, obviously, if you delete a group and it's maybe, say, deploying autopilot policies or, you know, things like that. You obviously want to be careful, but this is more just in the early stages of verifying that group.
List for your whole organization.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy. Yes. So, okay, cool. I think I'm all talked out about assignments and groups. Hopefully what I said makes sense. Deploy to user if you can. Make it available unless it's a core business application. And if you just need it on every single device in your environment, regardless of who's logged in, deploy it to device. But, I always start with user because I still believe that Intune is a user-centric device platform. And, I care very little about the device that we're on, hence why I still run around with a Mac like an idiot, which was fun when I was trying to play with Web Account Manager, which only works in Windows. That was fun. Okay. If anyone has any questions, either come off mute or jump in the chat, please.
So I just got a bit more of an open question for everyone around how many of you have made the effort to move away from legacy store app deployments via Intune? Were any of you even, apart from Steve, were any of you
Steve
even
doesn't count.
using legacy app deployments?
Steve's piece of shit. Yeah, crap.
But we didn't have a choice because
Yeah. So have you moved those over to new or to brackets new?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, do you go new? The same way that you do that, do you go new?
yeah, but you had to do that for company portal, so everyone probably did it.
Yes, it's like deploying.
What is?
And so, yeah, you win. Yeah. And I guess this is the other thing. And I don't know if there's any public information around when Win32 apps appear in here.
They do exist in there.
No.
Well, they were.
Are they all UWP apps?
Yeah.
No.
If you, hit the close box.
Type in
close
Notepad. Notepad plus plus is in there.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I think even 7-zip's in there as a Win32.
Try 7-zip.
Yeah, Dolby Creative Cloud, Acrobat Reader.
So they're in the store,
see
but
this.
they're not showing. They don't show up through here.
Yeah. This is only showing UWP applications.
Yeah.
What? That's whack. I thought
Yeah.
it was. It was
no
at one
dash.
point.
But if you
No
hit the
dash.
close with
7-zip, no dash. UWP.
This is not.
VLC.
Yeah. If you hit the close button, I think it says something like Win32 apps are in preview.
Preview, yeah.
And it's like, maybe it's in private preview because we're sure as hell not seeing them.
They were there initially.
No,
I thought they were.
VLC that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were there initially.
Like it was hit and miss, but
Yeah.
some of the big ones were there.
This is old. So that's cool. Hang on. I'm just going to do a thing because maybe this is a bug or maybe it's intentional. We're just going to go apps. We're going to go add Microsoft Store app, new. Learn more about the
Yeah,
Microsoft
VLC.
Store app. Okay,
Okay,
so
so
the link
VLC
is learn more about Winget store
I-
repo. That link is now dead, so we might want to flag that because it just takes you to Intune documentation. Let me do this right now. Screenshot. Oh no, my screenshot thing's not working. Whatever. Who cares? Oh no, it kind of worked. No, whatever. I'll definitely remember to do that later. So yeah, it is worth flagging that if anyone does see any links that are dead, especially in preview items, if anyone's looking at contributing to the community and fixing things, this can be a really great way to sort of get your feet wet in this sort of stuff because these things they're all developed by humans. We make mistakes. If you do find things like this, you can make it better and then feel like you're actually contributing to our wonderful community. Yes, very much in preview. So that's really interesting. I haven't actually played around with this a great deal.
Okay, so VLC is the Win32 app that's in there.
Yeah.
Type in
That's the
VLC.
winner.
But I prefer to keep old versions of VLC
Oh, I see,
on
yeah.
so that Defender always flags it as having vulnerabilities. Oh, no, it's a proper demo thing. Yeah.
TVR.
Because
So-
it used to be the culprit where so many people would push a version out of it on their SOE and then never update the thing and go, secure.
Yeah, if you try and select it there, I've noticed getting errors on it lately. Any Win32s.
Yeah, I like that there's a star next to it that doesn't tell me what that means.
Can you go
It
to the
means
next
it's a
step?
star.
Well, yeah, but I personally prefer VLC Plus Player by Alamedia E.K.
You know what the plus is for? The
What?
spyware they wrap around it.
Yeah, it's probably true. But what about Video Editor VLC Premiere? Is that the Premiere? No, it's come out of my head. Ransomware that
Probably,
they
could
wrap
be,
into it.
yeah.
It's Premiere ransomware. Yeah, so I'm
the
assuming
sleep
this is just
deprivation kicking in.
is this just the public feed of Winget? Is it scoped or filtered or vetted?
It's scoped, yes.
So someone thinks that Video Editor VLC Premiere is big
I'm
green
not
tick.
I'm not going down that.
No
Yeah,
comment.
probably,
Okay, cool.
it's probably
Very
a
good.
developer flag as opposed to a Microsoft managed flag or a Microsoft monitored
Yeah,
flag.
Because
maybe.
it is limited in what's in there, but
Sure.
Well,
So
so every
yeah.
inbox app except for Solitaire is published in the Microsoft Store now.
Sure. So there are differences between obviously the store is leveraging Winget, which look, I want Winget to succeed as much as
Don't
everyone.
even get me started.
Package identifier is cool. This is literally just the identifier in Winget that flags that this is this application. Interestingly, Winget doesn't support icons. So all of the apps in the new store do not have icons. This is going to make a lot of people on the internet very angry.
Yeah, understandably.
Yeah, but also maybe build a bridge because this is metadata that can be added later. Winget is a scalable system, and this is a very small piece of metadata that it can be solved. Make noise about it, but it's not the end of the world. You can still add it here yourself. But it is, it is a bit of an annoyance. I fully understand. Let's go through and so the assignment process here is exactly the same. I haven't tested how Winget works if you deploy to device or user, or whether it's sort of system or user scoped or any of that sort of stuff, just because I haven't currently had the capacity to work on it. But it is a cool feature, and I think Winget is a smart decision to as far as a delivery mechanism, especially for this sort of stuff. Mark, have you played around much with Winget and delivery optimization? Because I know you were doing this at one point.
Yeah, I was. It still seems to be pretty much if it's not, or at least if you're, it seems that it tends to work better peer-to-peer DO, but if you're using like a connected cache server, it just, anything Win32 seems to completely ignore that request.
Interesting. So,
and that's
what you're
even
saying
with,
is it's not ready for GA yet?
Correct. And that applies to several of the technologies that we're talking about.
Sure. I know exactly what you mean. Okay, cool. Let's just make this and see what it looks like. It's interesting that obviously, the packages in Winget have their own detection logic. So like it's interesting you can't see any of this stuff here. It would be nice to be able to actually like expose that data out of the payload so that you could see what the detection logic was. But I would assume there's no way to change it because you're simply making a Winget call locally. Steve.
So one thing to add in there is the install behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You can only change this when you're creating it. You can't change it after you've created it without deleting it and re-adding it. So if you go back to app info for a spin.
Yeah.
So if it's a UWP app, it will have the option to do system or user, and that will install whether it's in the system or the user context, and you can't change after you've published it. So company portal's a good example. That's where you should be doing it as system.
Sure. A question for you. Is this simply a UI thing, or can you change this through Graph? Because this used to be a limitation on things like Line for Business.
I've not tested.
Interesting. So a really good example of this for everyone that's playing along. If you, to this day, if you, that might be a lie. It's been a very long time since I've done this. But if you created a very simple Intune Win payload with an MSI and uploaded that to the portal, it would grab what it thought was necessary and it would actually hard code like the installation behavior and things like that, and you couldn't change it. Now, if you uploaded it with your own metadata, so you knew that it had to be user as opposed to system, then you could override that. But this is just a case of the UI going, we'll extrapolate the data that we get from this and we'll make some helpful decisions for you. But they weren't always the best. So, obviously, if you know graph, you can override that sort of stuff. But I would just be curious to know whether that is overridable or not, because that might be necessary.
Yeah, as a UWP, it definitely is. So if you were to go select a different app,
yeah, let's do that.
Portal.
New. Calculator 1.
Company
No.
portal.
ACalc, Arc Survival Evolved.
Windows calculator.
Yep, this one.
So
Okay,
you can
so
see
yeah.
that you can select system or user.
Yeah, sure. Has anyone played with the featured app in company portal before? What a very exciting feature that is. Basically, just like if you've got a couple of hundred apps in the company portal, this will just drag it to the top. Works pretty well.
You set every one of them to featured in.
Absolutely. That's right. That's right.
When you're updating apps and you can do the what the bottom is like the you're updating the versions and you're doing super seasons, yes.
So for store apps, you don't need to worry about updating in supersedes. It's when Git handles all of that.
It'll just update automatically.
Does it actually update automatically, Steve?
Yes.
Sure.
So I've been told.
Okay, cool. I haven't tested that.
Are the apps actually updated themselves from the vendors? Is probably more the next question.
Well, that's the $1 billion question.
That's the $1 billion question.
It's not if the engine's updating it. Is there an update from the vendor published?
Yeah. So like all, and I'm calling Winget new because in the scheme of things it is new. Like all repository solutions, they are only as good as the content or the catalog that is being used, and by that virtue, the people that are putting content in there. So Winget is great, and it is a community sort of collaboration tool at the moment. But when you start doing searches for things like 7-zip and you see 700 different versions of 7-zip, it does really get to a point where like it would be lovely if there was some kind of official vetting process that was documented and explained, because I personally do see, let's say, adoption of things like this will be slower if there isn't that kind of trust or a vetting process, because it literally anyone can add an app to Winget. Now, I don't know what the process is of floating that to the actual UI for this sort of thing. And obviously this is in preview, so things will change, things will improve. I hope that this feature allows you to essentially only get access to a list of trusted applications. If that's the case, then that's a success in my book. But if I search for 7-zip and I see multiple kinds of 7-zip and Igor's one isn't there, then I'm concerned. Oh, and the bosses have left. All right, I think this is time for you guys to riot.
Having talk shit about the bosses.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I've done heaps of talking. Does anyone else want to talk about anything? It can be app related. It can be anything related. I'm not phased.
And I have 2 questions.
Go for it.
Is it still best practice, like instead of using dynamic groups, to try and use all users and all devices and filter based on those?
It depends on whether you're doing dynamic groups based on users or devices. So filters can absolutely replace if you're doing dynamic groups based on device, but it can't solve that for users just yet. So yeah, the answer with all of these things, especially with that magic word best practice, is it depends. Filters should always be your preferred solution unless you can't use filters.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. Second thing, you know, when you have an MSI app and you target and like a / no restart, like obviously that like stops it from not restarting, but what does it actually do to the app install behind the scenes?
What no restart and sort of not QN, but no restart on an MSI generally is telling the MSI to suppress any exit codes that flag as reboot required. So it doesn't actually. It depends on how the vendor has actually packaged that software, whether these things work or not. Because you can absolutely just be the laziest vendor in the world, say you support no restart, and still sneak a restart through. So what it's supposed to do is two things. So the first thing is if there are any runtimes or processes inside that MSI database, it should suppress those things from running. So like if you make a change to an environment that needs a reboot, then supporting no reboot or reboot equals really suppress, you have to hope that the vendor has done their due diligence to make sure that's supported. But the more realistic scenario for us is that the exit code that returns back as a reboot is required should never appear when you have no reboot. So that's really all that's doing, is it's just saying, look, the computer or the system might be in an unstable state, but I'm not getting an exit code that is going to tell my management platform that a reboot's required. So that's kind of the goal with that. But again, vendors can do whatever they want with MSI. There's a very good document on how to use it, but it's a huge system. It's very bulky, and you can kind of do whatever you want with it, which is why people do very silly things with it, like nesting MSIs inside of MSIs to install exes as examples. So yeah.
Or using it as a complicated zip file that then runs its own installer process.
Precisely. So yeah.
I've never seen that happen.
Yeah, I've seen too many bad things with it. But at the end of the day, MSI is still the industry standard for installing applications in a Windows space. There has been other things that have tried to usurp it. But the big thing here is trying to get developer and vendor adoption onto a system that people promise is going to be the be all and end all. So far has not managed to knock MSI off its throne. But we've also seen terrible examples of MSI installers. So yeah, just with any MSI, it really just does come down to trust the packager of the software that's going to Intune has verified what install flags do and what the experience is. One of the other really important things from just from Patch My PC that we've really run into, that we aggressively test the upgrade experience from one app to another. So you can do all of the work that you want to make sure that app A installs silently and it's perfectly. But if the next version doesn't upgrade nicely, or it causes a reboot, or we've run into scenarios where vendors have decided to get rid of the ability to install things silently on the latest version of their app. So let's just say we've taken those out of the catalog. So it just goes without saying that these things need to be tested every single time there's a new version. That does take up a lot of time, and it is a terrible job, and no one likes doing it. But if you don't test these things, that's how configuration drift comes in. That's how bad user experience comes in as far as installing apps. It's also how things will fail to install, or you make your systems unstable. So, always test, always test, always test.
Any other questions?
Has anyone played around with the supersedence flags on the applications? I know it's been recently released from preview.
I've had a small play with it. Trying to use versioning to update. Does it look at the actual detection rule, or if it's superseded, does it just look at the package object from the one that's superseding? I'm curious.
If you say that this application supersedes that application, then the system says that it does. So if you're trying to say that an earlier version of an application supersedes an older version, or vice versa, it will work. If your detection logic doesn't support going backwards, because there is a scenario, a very bad scenario, but there's a scenario where you want to use supersedence to do a rollback. But if your detection logic doesn't support, or if it's saying greater than or equal to or greater than or anything like that, then that's not going to work. So if you ever wanted to do that as a rollback, you would need to have your detection logic to be equals, and then hope that you don't get yourself in a race condition with installs, because I've seen it. It's not fun at all. Steve knows exactly what I'm talking about.
6 weeks.
So yeah, supersedence is an interesting one. Does everyone know there's a limit of 10 supersedent apps in a chain?
Yep, it tells you.
Yeah, it's in it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's well documented. It's exactly the same as the dependency chain stuff. It's built on the same framework. It's literally how can we link and historically categorize where applications live there. But you can absolutely, by choice, do silly things with this. So it doesn't care what the version is. It's simply expecting that you are saying that version X supersedes version Y. If that is incorrect, then that's on you. There aren't really a lot of guardrails here. It's simply just, where in the timeline does this application live? And you want to make sure that your detection logic supports that functionality.
Yeah. Can you delete the oldest one in the chain of 10? Is that, or do you have to start again?
So supersedence, you can only delete the end of the chain. You can't delete things in the middle. That can absolutely cause problems. So if someone goes in, this is kind of the same as dependency chains as well. You can't delete a thing in the middle of a dependency chain, and the UI currently doesn't show a nice tree view. So if you jump into the middle of an app, you can't see what's above. You can only see what's below. Or maybe it's the other way around. It's been a minute since I've looked at it. But yeah, so like in Graph, you can absolutely move things around, but you need to be able to control the entire dependency tree, right? So the best thing I would suggest is that, if you want to make tools that sort of fell the supersedence tree or forest in this case, if you're deleting something from the middle, you need to remember that you need to delete it from the bottom all the way up to that point. So I've absolutely been in environments where someone has got really excited with dependency chains, where they were just like, oh, I can just deploy one thing and it's going to chain through and install a whole bunch for me. But then one of those apps was packaged incorrectly, and I couldn't delete it because I didn't know what the chain was. So you can view all that stuff through Graph, but you need to write it yourself. There's no nice view. We've built some fun tools in where I work, so that we can sort of chop and change and do cool stuff. But yeah, it's not fun. So use these things with caution. And obviously the important thing here is validate that everything in your environment is working correctly before you link supersedent stuff, because once it's there, it becomes difficult to clean up.
Cool. Thank you.
All good. Yeah, I mean, the counter to supersedence is to simply make another version and then make your requirement and your detection logic, allow that to win as far as deployment. And then once it's deploying, remove the assignments from the previous version. So it's manually deploying, right? So
and deploy via rings or groups.
Yeah, exactly. So there's absolutely ways to do this. I'm not going to say better. I'm just going to say that you can do it at a larger scale, because dependency supersedence can only be done 10 times. Apps don't update until 10 and then they're off. But that does mean that cleaning these things up becomes a manual process. You'll forget. It'll get to 11, and you'll be like, oh, what's the earliest one? And then so you can get yourself in a position where you have to do a lot more work down the line. So make sure it's fit for purpose before you start rolling it out is what I would suggest.
Okay, well, if there aren't any more questions around app deployment, I think we'll let Ben get back to something that resembles life and trying to get back into the time zone or seeing your loved ones?
Listen, I have a call with the team that I was just working with, so I guess I'm just never sleeping, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I've got one more if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
As I said in the chat, we use dynamic groups and group tags to target autopilot deployments. They also, like I'm picking up this environment, they're also using the same groups to do app deployments. Is that good or bad in your opinion? Have you come across it? Should there be
sorry, what was the first part? So you're using dynamic and assignments.
Yeah, dynamic groups, which check the group tag and use autopilot deployment profiles based on that group.
Yep.
They're also, and the same group then is deploying applications.
There's no problems with that. You can absolutely mix and use those groups. Just know that obviously dynamic groups means it's going to vary from time to time. So, if that dynamic group isn't constantly growing, as in if it's starting to remove devices because of reason, A, B, or C, just be aware that if it's a core or critical application, then, the chance is there that a device might not get that software. Or, if you're doing the inverse where you're saying if it's not in that group, then do an uninstall. There are scenarios that I've seen very well-meaning dynamic groups that just aren't super stable. And then, they're essentially having, includes and excludes to say if you're not in this group, then you don't get the software. And then the experience is not all that shiny. But if you're happy with how the dynamic groups are working, there's absolutely no problem using them for double duties. I would even suggest that you could potentially use that to deploy out your configuration policies and things like that as well.
Yeah, I just think it
depends on the size of your environment as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it gives less option, I think, for management and changing of things, which is kind of where the question is coming from.
Yes and no, because what you can start doing is you can create a separate group for your pilot and you just start phasing it across that way.
Yeah.
So what you do is you basically exclude your pilot group from that policy, put it onto a new one, and then once you're comfortable from a pilot point of view, you just step your other devices across. Or you use that as an inflection point to change the groups that you're targeting, and you can target to all devices and then put a filter in there based upon the autopilot profile.
Yeah.
It'll do the same thing as what your group tags are doing.
Okay.
So it comes down to, do you want to cycle through, or do you just want to go, well, I can continue on as I am and there's not a major concern?
Yep. Okay. I think user filters would be helpful whenever they come in. Device filters are good, but it gets hard to target exactly what you want at times.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
just while that got brought up, just curious to know, does everyone know how many dynamic groups you can have in a tenant?
Isn't that 500?
5,000 dynamic groups.
Okay.
Now there is also a number for static groups, but there is a number. I just want to stress this, that I've been told by channels that will remain nameless that creating too many security groups gives people headaches internally. They don't work the same as they do in AD. This is primarily why Steve and I also aggressively stress not to do nested groups.
Please don't do nested.
because unless you're in an education environment, your UI is terrible. There's other reasons. It's just set 7 o'clock, so my lights are automatically turning off to remind me to not be working.
They do now. For the most part, nested work.
They absolutely work, but just never do them.
No, there was a period of time where certain
that period of time is over.
But it's fixed now, and please don't use nested.
Yeah.
No,
Steve, you missed that, I think. It's hit 7 o'clock, so my lights are slowly turning off to remind me to not be at work.
I saw.
Yeah, very good. All right, nice.
I giggled.
Yeah, you got to wait until this one comes in. Nice. All right. Does anyone have any questions, or can we get Mark to do a dance?
No, I think we'll just wrap things up and let you go.
Nice.
So thanks, Ben. Yeah, I know you committed to this prior to, I think before you were aware of what your travel plans were going to be,
Yes, I
which
was.
is a brave, I'll call it brave.
Yeah.
There's another word I'm thinking, but brave is a nice one.
Light.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, but otherwise, thanks for going through all that, Ben. I know that, you're probably going to have nightmares about this stuff again. I know you've successfully pushed some of it out of your head, but now
Yeah.
it's all come flowing back in again.
Yep. Yep, I have. Oh, I've got a question for you, Mark. When's our next user group and what are we talking about then?
Oh, actually, that's a really good question.
Well,
I should have, because I wanted to sort of get to your piece quickly, I skipped through the Ignite slide pretty quickly.
Jerome
Okay.
will be doing it next month, right? Because he's not here.
Yeah, he's not here, so yeah, he's okay. So I guess the question is then, we probably should push it out until after Ignite. Ignite, or when?
There'll be a lot more announcements at Ignite, I would assume.
Yeah. So I'm thinking it kind of makes sense for us to push it. So Ignite is like, let's say 14th to 17th, something along those lines.
Yes, that's correct.
Which would make the day for us be. So thank you, Ben, for reminding me of something I didn't ask you to remind me about, but I needed to be reminded about.
Mm-hmm.
We got. So then, yeah. So we would have been on the 8th of November, but I think we'll need it. It just seems to make more sense if we push it out to the 22nd.
Sure.
And I think that means you'll be back in town as well.
Yes.
So your mission at Ignite is to find
To not get liver poisoning?
no is to find the worst booth giveaway that you possibly can.
There's not going to be any.
Yeah, there will be. Someone is going to have something horrible.
Nah.
that
What
will
do you mean
look
there's
at.
not going to be any booths?
there's always-
Steve, I can tell you immediately there's going to be a booth.
There's not going to be any swag or very little swag.
There's going to be swag.
There's going to be squeaky ducks, I'm sure.
You've met our company. We've got swag. It's going to be available.
And there could still be some fidget spinners that people have had sitting in a warehouse for 4 years that they pull out. So there has to be something.
That's not the MVP summit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like, yeah, that's like 3 logos ago. It's free. Or the Microsoft the toolkits.
Ask Ben about his toolkit.
Yeah, the toolkit. And someone said, no, just think of it that it's retro themed.
Yeah,
Does it
no,
have
the
the
toolkit.
old Microsoft
Someone at
logo on
Sydney Airport is loving that. I decided to put it in my carry-on luggage, and they were like, "Is this toolkit for your work?" I'm like, "No, just take it. I don't care."
It's high. It was high quality.
It's extremely high quality.
Yes,
Actually used it. Not in the correct way, but actually used it.
But you used it as a door jam to keep.
So I use the screwdrivers as leverages to pull stuff out.
So that's your mission. See what you can get. Like not one for everyone, just something that
I'll ask Leo.
okay.
I'll ask
You'll have something somewhere.
I'll get the what is it, 90-second dance party?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I want.
You didn't come over to the reactor on campus then at Summit.
Yeah.
Visit us.
I didn't see that.
Button and dance. Anyway,
I'm lost.
we can get you some irrelevant swag.
Oh, it has to be bad though.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that we customize something just for you, Mark. It'll be the worst thing you've ever seen.
Oh, fantastic. I approve that. Okay, so I'll get that update. Actually, I think let me update Meetup now.
Oh,
before I forget. But thank you for reminding me of that.
Nice. All right. I'm going to jump off, guys, because I'm getting pinged to jump on another call.
How long are you presenting?
I did. My screen is currently not sharing, thus I'm not presenting anymore.
Well, you just said it to do that.
Yeah, it's fine. I am in
Then
D&D.
make sure you reply to my email.
No. Sorry, what was your email? Was it just about the NDA stuff? The license?
No, all that is sorted. I was more curious around how do you do N-1, N-2 kind of versions. So I've been playing around with the patch my PC stuff, like it, but in an enterprise environment, latest doesn't mean every time you could do that. There are requirements around doing N-2 and stuff like that. So I've put some pictures in the email for you to see around the Java JRE, which you have in Patch My PC. So I'm more curious that I don't want the latest which you highlight in the package. I want probably N-2, let's say. How do you do that?
So I'm gonna tell you two things. The first one is if your patching strategy is to not be up to date, then you do not have a patching strategy. You have an allowance to allow risk into your environment. The second thing is it's something we're working on. We just want to make sure that we can build a solution that doesn't let our users get themselves in a position where they've set a thing up and they're out of band for like critical updates and things like that. So it is absolutely a thing we're working on. But right now, Aresh, we don't have that functionality, but that's intentional because it's basically greenfield. So if you're in an environment where devices can't be at that version, figure out where they can and deploy to those. And then once you're at a level where you can deploy that software, so basically once you start using the product for long enough and you start deploying applications in, then you can actually have a history of applications that you can then choose to deploy to. So you can start doing N-1 once you've got a couple of versions of the application in there. But the primary goal here is, at least at the initial deployment stage, get your software updated. If someone says we have to do N-1, tell them, ask them why until they break apart, and then you can dance on there.
Yeah, I kind of agree, but there is some challenges around applications. Like I'll tell you some applications which are few logistical applications where application vendor comes up with the minimum requirement. So unfortunately, what happens is they in the requirement mention that it needs Java 8 update only, let's say ABC, right? And you need that only for the app to work. Now, if you go and put the latest version of Java, it just breaks their application, unfortunately. So much as I totally agree that from a security standpoint, you should be doing latest, but from a reality perspective, these applications block you from going to latest because either you have to choose whether you want to use the application or you want to patch the application.
Yeah, I mean, look, in that scenario, I would think, and I'm gonna wrap this up quickly. But if you're in a situation where you have let's say an internal application that relies on a hardcore or pinned version of that app, then you're not in a patching conversation. You simply need to package that one version and just move on. That is not going to be part of your patching cycle because it can't be patched. You would then also want to raise that with security, that is a major concern in your environment, especially with things like Java, because every single time there's an update to Java, it's patching a CVE, 0-day bug. So if you're in that situation, and I know you're not specifically saying that, but organizations that are in environments with software that requires unsecure software are causing major security problems. They just haven't been hit yet. But yeah, the solution is basically don't use Patch My PT to update software that you can't patch because you can't patch it. But we're building a solution that will solve it.
You need to fix it, Finn.
Listen, you know what? I'm working on it now. I got three keyboards in front of me. That should make me 3 times as fast.
I bet you have 3 keyboards just so you can actually type perfectly. Because at least one of them, one of them doesn't have the right layout. And
yeah, you work with layers. I work with multiple keyboards. Yeah. Awesome. All right, I have to jump, guys.
Yeah,
It's been
okay,
lovely
thanks,
talking.
Thanks,
We'll see
Ben.
you guys
Thank you.
next month.
So then I've got one last one that actually ties in a little bit from what Aresh was just asking about. What's your strategy? Let's say if you've got something you can push out, an app that you can push out that's a Microsoft app, that if you allow other Microsoft updates through Windows Update, that it will automatically update it. Do you bother updating the base version that you push out, knowing that the next time Windows Update checks that a fresh version is going to get pulled down?
You should, but nobody does.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought the
Yeah.
answer was going to be. Yeah.
That's what I'm going through.
As aggressively as I would.
Yeah, because
From a the speed to getting the application installed and updated for the user.
and I guess because you've got some of the mobile issues, etc. as well. Yeah, you've got bandwidth. Well, it's not bandwidth, but
Update credentials.
actually, based on the last conversation, bandwidth was also.
You don't have to be logging your signature into 1,000 computers. You
Yeah.
know, like
It's only when it causes a problem or some kind of security incident.
That's never the case.
Yeah,
it's only right now when we got hacked in the US. Now suddenly like, oh, hang on, our vulnerabilities are above 100,000. Let's start getting this down.
yeah.
That sounds like a good competition.
We got screamed at because the other region are down at 40,000. I'm like, yes, we've done nothing all week. Come on, people, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was wondering if anyone was being religious about that, or if you thought,
Which one?
Yeah, we do need to CrowdStrike.
CrowdStrike.
Which is a piece of shit.
okay. Well, I'll stop the recording. So we just caught your last couple of words there about CrowdStrike.
Yeah.
You know what you said after CrowdStrike? Yes. Okay, so let's just stop the recording. Just in case.
In the right building for that statement.